Hi. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books. Welcome St. Louis author Esme Symes-Smith, who will be discussing their incredible continuation of the beloved Sir Callie series with return in Sir Callie and the Dragon's Roost. I've got my copy right here. Left Bank Books is in St. Louis. It's the oldest independent bookstore, and we would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Esme, and everyone for their outpouring love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers in-store shopping, delivery to anywhere in the world, and for the virtual audience watching, we are happy to bring you our event series virtually. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind, bring new thoughts, and make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for all your friends on our website at leftbankbooks.com. Purchasing a copy allows us to keep our bookstores and staff operating. Thank you so much for your support. I'm Taylor. I'm a bookseller here at Left Banks, and we produce hundreds of author events every year with a fantastic team in St. Louis, and we will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event. Virtual audience members, please go ahead and type your questions as a comment, and we will moderate those after Esme has finished chatting with their editor, Lisa, who they're in conversation with tonight. We're almost done with events for the year, but we have some really incredible things we're working on next year, so make sure to stay tuned in on our socials, our newsletters, and all of that good stuff. We're going to be offering hybrid events in-store and virtual as well. So make sure to check out our upcoming event calendar as those full details come out. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book, Sir Callie and the Dragon's Roost. The battle is won, but the war is far from over. In this thrilling sequel, a 12-year-old non-binary hopeful knight fights for the heart of their kingdom in a magical medieval world filled with dragons, shapeshifters, and witches. Thanks to Callie and their friends, Helston seems to be changing for the better. Boys are allowed to explore magic, and girls are permitted to train as warriors. Callie is an official Helston page. Willow, on track to become king. Elowen and Edwyn are finally safe and free of their father. Everything's perfect. Except it isn't. Not in Helston, where every step forward is accompanied by a storm of opposition. Even Queen Elowen and Sir Nick are struggling against the wave of fear and anti-magic sentiment growing daily, while the encroaching threat from across the bridge looms. Callie isn't foolish. They notice the suspicious glances thrown Neil's way and hear the doubtful murmurs following Willow. They know what people will think about them too. Tolerance is not the same as acceptance, and when fragile peace finally shatters, Callie and their friends have no choice but to leave their home and run. On the other side of the bridge, old secrets are revealed and new alliances are formed that will throw into question everything Callie thought they knew about their world, including what it means to be a hero. Exciting plot twists and a cliffhanger ending heightened anticipation for the next entry. A suspenseful fantasy quest driven by social themes was a Kirkus review. And after cutting their teeth on a steady diet of fan fiction in the southwest of England, Esme Symes-Smith wandered into North Wales for the degree in literature and creative writing, then promptly migrated to Missouri after meeting their wife on Tumblr. Esme has been a ghostwriter and editor, a frozen yogurt seller, and a caffeine purveyor. They now wrangle preschoolers for a living and have a severe tea problem. Without further ado, on behalf of Left Bank Books, would you all please help me welcoming Esme Symes-Smith? Clap so loudly so that Esme hears you from wherever you are.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh my goodness.
I'm so glad y'all are here.
Me too. And I'm also joined by my spectacular editor, Lisa Abrams of Labyrinth Road, Penguin Random House, who is literally the best person ever, and stepping in for Terry Benton-Walker, who could not be with us today.
Hello. It's fun to see you and celebrate our book together.
I know. I'm so excited. It definitely feels like, multi-parents here.
Exactly. Okay, so I want to start off by saying that for anyone who's joining us here who actually might be new to the series in general, even though this is book 2 that just came out, can you share a brief description of the inspiration for the series, like what the original idea was, and how you conceived it, and then what the story became for the series?
Yeah, absolutely. So Callie and the Champions of Helston started as the Princess Champion way back in the day, which was 2020. I wrote it for April NaNoWriMo when the pandemic hit and everything was on fire. And I really wanted something that brought me joy. And I looked back and thought about, what makes me happy? What haven't I written about yet? and, you know, kids with swords came out because yay to more Pierce. So that was really the big inspiration. I just wanted to play in a world where I could have fun, but I was also feeling so many like big feelings of like frustration and helplessness and just like anger at what was going on. So in my fun fantasy world, I funneled all of my 2020 rage and produced Callie somehow. The first thing that I came to was, you know, the trio Callie, Willow, and Elowen. I knew that I wanted this fierce kid, this strong girl, and this soft boy. And those were my like starting pieces. I'm such a character-driven writer that everything kind of came out of that. And then somehow it turned into this huge sprawling fantasy series with dragons and witches and questioning our places in the world and how on earth we're going to get to a better place at the end. And we're still working that out, and that's okay because it's a 4-book series.
That actually is a great transition into the next thing I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about, which is that one of the themes of the books, I'm so happy about this, one of the themes that I know is important to you that the reviewers have really homed in on and called out repeatedly is that determination that the kids have in these books to just keep pushing for justice, and no matter how much the adults in their world let them down and let themselves and one another down, that these kids will not give up for trying to achieve what is right. And I feel like you bring such nuance to the idea itself of justice and that whole question of right versus wrong, and is there even such a thing as these absolutes of right and wrong, or like how do you figure out, especially in book 2, one of the big themes for sure is like that recognition of like what if you can't always tell what is right and wrong, and how do kids approach these issues differently from adults, and how did you want to sort of focus on that difference?
Yeah, and you know, it's a question that I ask myself every time I sit down and write, and that can be really, really tough when you're kind of like looking at what's going on in the wider real world and going like, how would I solve this problem? How do I want to tackle this? And then, you know, kids are they're in this little tiny world, whether they're contemporary or fantastical or historical or whatever. I feel like this is such a timeless aspect of middle grade. You know, the world is what the adults around them make it. And I remember being a kid in a grown-up's world, just being so frustrated and filled with such righteous indignation that I can see what is right. And I don't understand why other people can't. And, you know, and as an adult, I feel that so heavily as well. And it's something that I'm still working out, you know. I feel like this is the best series that I could be writing right now, just to work out those big feelings. But I really wanted to, especially in book 2, really tackle the reason why we assume things about people and the stories that are told. And, you know, there's always truth in lies, there's always truth in stories, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the big picture, you know, it's not necessarily accurate. Originally, when I started writing Callie 2, I had envisioned it as like, you know, a magical school series where, you know, they have their shenanigans in Helston and have a great time. And then, you know, I'm looking at everything that's going on and realizing that just because one problem is solved, it doesn't mean that everything is solved. And the world that permitted someone like Perrin to exist and thrive is not one that's just going to change automatically. And that was a really, you know, that changed my whole perspective on what I wanted the series to be. And I realized that Callie and Co, they exist so differently within the realm of Helston that like normal everyday life is not an option for them. There is no normal to get into. They have to recreate it from scratch. And it was really interesting and hard when Callie is questioning not just the system that they know is broken, but like, you know, where Nick, their dad, gets their ideas from, even Neil, you know, everyone who they trust and love comes with their own assumptions and their own false assumptions, you know, whether they're good or bad or everything in between. And it could be really hard for kids who are trying to work out their own morality and where they stand on right and wrong to like have to work it out for themselves when the people around them don't have those solid answers, or it can be perceived as wrong.
I mean, again, I think that's something that you do so wonderfully in these books, is really you you don't shy away from the complexity of it, and you'd never oversimplify you know, the characters. There's no such thing as the character who's right about everything or wrong about everything in this world, which I think is so important. So speaking of some of that, you've also shared that in some ways you feel like you were able to be even more of yourself on the page in book 2 than in book 1. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, or like where you felt like, without any big spoilers for anyone who hasn't read even book 1 possibly yet, especially, but if they haven't read book 2 yet, if you could talk a little bit about the experience of what gave you that comfort of pushing those. I mean, I know I push my authors to push boundaries. That's definitely true. But what in that sort of like give and take that we had and that you had even in your own brain, like how did that process work for you? Were you able to kind of open that up?
Yeah, I remember when I emailed you going like, I know you're not my therapist, but please can we talk? And the advice that you gave me was write with the door shut. And that really got me out of my head, because this was my first book, like on deadline. With like book 1, you know, I wrote it not thinking it was going to sell, so it was fine. No one's going to read it. It was fine. And then book 2 was like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Oh my God, this is going to be on shelves. I don't think it's going to be any good. Oh my goodness. So writing with the door shut and really getting back to what I love most about writing and what I needed from this story just was astronomical, because I could let go of the fears I had that people wouldn't like it. I could put my anxieties aside for later, for like, you know, anything that I needed to change, and just kind of get down to the real heart of the book, which is the kids and, you know, their struggle with getting past their traumas, you know, learning new things about themselves, kind of muddling through and being messy, and letting my writing be messy at the same time. It was really a journey in trusting myself. And I'm forever thankful that you trust me in a way that I really struggle to. So I feel like that brought out kind of my faith that I can tell this story the way I want to tell it. And then I'm just so thankful that it turned into what it did, because I didn't like this book at all until, you know, the art came and reviewers started reading it. It was just something that I just didn't want to think about, because it was so personal to me, and it felt like the fan fiction I used to write. It felt like the stories I used to tell myself when I was struggling as a kid, and in that sense, it was just like the most me thing I'd ever written. And I was all prepared to like strip it down and make it palatable, and, you know, kind of give it the fun veneer that book 1 had. I love book 1 with my whole heart, but it always felt very safe to me. You know, it's very contained. It ends positively. Whereas book 2 is something else entirely. But yeah, just getting rid of all the nonsense and just remembering why I'm telling stories, who I want to tell these stories to, and, you know, speaking to myself and like maybe one kid in the future who might get something out of it. That was the most important thing to me.
Many more than one kid is
getting
something out of it. So what about when it comes to plot? You know, for anyone who's watching this who also might be fellow authors who are maybe thinking about writing a series or working on writing series, since this was your first time, like you said, writing a book under contract that or you know, with under the deadline that was already you know, starting after having done book 1, how did you approach thinking about plot in terms of for a second book in a series, knowing that you were planning to make the series extend beyond the second book? Like, did you plan out where you wanted everything to go, or, you know, are you a plotter or a pantser? Obviously, but specifically in a series structure, which is a different thing than a standalone book.
Well, it's because like you bought 2 books, so I didn't know how many books it was going to be. I didn't know how many books I wanted it to be, and, you know, I didn't know what I wanted the series to be altogether. It was very much working it out as I went, and I feel like that speaks to me being very much a pantser. I really love the experience of telling myself the story and learning things as I go, but that means a lot of deleted words. So I have a lot of full starts in book 2, and I have like, goodness, I looked back on my Kindle the other day and I had like 50,000 words of a draft that I completely don't remember writing. It's completely different. What was the question? Yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen until it happens. My experience with writing book 4 is much nicer because it's that nice, slow, inevitable slide to the end. Whereas book 2 was anything is possible, which means I have the responsibility of making those choices, which is kind of really scary, because if you move things in the wrong direction and you say, yes, this is book 2, and then you're in book 3 going, oh my God, I made a terrible mistake. There's nothing you can do about that now. So it definitely feels a little bit like jumping off a cliff and hoping there's water at the bottom and not rocks. So far it's been water. And it's just been so interesting watching this world unfold. And it's definitely scary. I feel like plotting a series is nearly impossible just because you have no idea what's going to happen, especially in traditional publishing, when you really you don't know what it's going to be day to day, honestly. But having 4 books, I was really able to envision the structure of it, even if I didn't necessarily know how we were going to get from point to point. I had bits and pieces that I wanted to get to book. And I remember thinking about like how many more books I needed after book 2, and like I could do it in 3, but there were certain character arcs that I felt needed so much more like breathing space, especially for Willow in particular. And just like thinking about each character's individual arc over those 4 books, I could really plot out in a non-plotty way, in a very like character-driven way, what I wanted the series to be.
So then, speaking of characters, I have a question for you, of course, because I can't talk to you without talking about Edwyn. That you and I share a passion for flawed, imperfect characters and being able to see them in all their messiness. And again, sort of back to what we were talking about earlier, that you don't have that compulsion to make a character perfect in order to make them sympathetic or even or likable, and sometimes not even likable, but for us to like feel that connection to them and relate to them. And so I wonder if you want to speak a little bit as an author and just a reader and a person about what your understanding is of why we tend to gravitate toward characters like Edwyn. Why I think Edwyn has really emerged in the second book, to some people's surprise, possibly from the first book. And again, being careful of spoilers, but when we see not necessarily redemption so much as the deeper understanding of sort of who someone is and that like their own path toward understanding themselves, what do you think that is that we all sort of need as readers?
No, I love that question because I love him so much. And I'm so thankful that I've been able to draw him out the way I've been able to, which feels very honest to what I needed to see. And I think there's a moment in Dragon's Roost where he's just kind of agonizing that everything is better, but he still doesn't feel happy. And like, that just speaks to me so damn hard. I remember feeling that way and like looking at the world around me and everything was fine. And why don't I feel happy? And everyone's just like, why aren't you happy? Clearly, like, we're doing something wrong because you're not happy. And then feeling guilty for not being happy. So like having to be happy, but not really. Yeah, so that's where Edwyn comes from. And I've always really like connected with the characters that don't get a lot of page time, a lot of screen time. They're usually the ones that like are portrayed as the antagonists in stories. They're the ones I always wanted to write fic about because I could see myself so strongly in those like angry at the world, flawed characters who can't necessarily see a smooth path towards their happy ending, and it always bothered me that either those characters were transformed into these sunny, happy people, or they were vilified to the end. And I really wanted to give a character like Edwyn, the chance to be a hero, the chance to have his happy ending, but not at the expense of himself, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not expecting him to be 100% okay by the end of book 4, but he will be in a better place. And I really, part of the reason why I love book 2 so much was seeing kind of the connection that he has with Callie. And then you have Elowen and Willow, who are just so thrilled to not be in Helston anymore. And Callie and everyone just going, this is weird and horrible and I hate it, even though this is better, but it doesn't feel better. So I really love those bonding moments where they're just being goblin-y together. But yeah, I've always loved the characters, and I'm so thrilled that I get the space to portray Edwyn the way I need to.
I mean, yes, he's he's a favorite for me for many reasons. So another scene in book, this is just tiny, barely. This is not plot spoiler, but it's a spoiler to discuss a specific scene in the book, which is, from the very start of the series, you've had this really wonderfully inclusive cast, and so much of that is just the fabric of what's there without necessarily being actively examined or discussed among the characters. But in book 2, there is a scene that was important to you, I know, where they actually really do discuss very directly labels and language around queer identities of, and some of it is sort of discovery for some of these characters. And so I just wondered if you could share more about what felt important to you to have something, to have that scene where they really are talking about the words and the language.
Yeah, I remember being really anxious about that scene because it felt like it fit so poorly within a fantastical setting. But equally, like, I'm not just writing a fantasy, I'm writing about kids who exist, and it says in the book, and I completely agree, like labels and names and identifiers are a way to build community. It's like proof that you're not on your own, and I've seen so much discussion, especially around like lesbians, that they can be so like ignored, like that label just gets so ignored. So it was really important to me to have that on the page for some of my characters to identify that with specifically, and especially in regards to Callie, who's non-binary, and they have that discussion too. It's just like, how do these labels fit when you don't have a gender, and that's something that I've been working out as a person. It's something that I know that so many kids are like talking about in school, and like it's so fascinating to me because even if there's a kid who's not, thinking about it, but they're feeling it in some kind of way, and then suddenly that word appears on the screen or in a book, they're just like, I'm not an abomination. Like, I'm not alone. I'm not a freak, because this language exists, it means other people exist. And it means that they're here and they're thriving and they can be a part of that community too. It's like, it's a way to have community away, if that makes sense.
And I think, again, just how you addressed it in that scene too, it feels expansive, not contracting. It doesn't feel like a conversation where it's that someone has to have a label, obviously, who doesn't feel that they want to have one or need to have one, but that they can connect and have and find that word if it's something that they're looking for. And having a 10-year-old kid, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
I can attest to the fact that actually my child is really fascinated by the language around the language within queer spaces and wanting to sort of understand, and actually has like tried to come up with their own words for them that like actually don't exist anywhere, and yes. It's like even all the words that we now have, like they still feel like there's words that have not been exactly what they want for themselves.
Exactly. And it's like it's a constantly growing dictionary, and that's
it's a great way to put it. And I feel like that scene helps give that space for readers.
Yeah, and it also kind of like it shows that there aren't necessarily rules, like just because this is the definition for this word, you can still fit in there even if you don't necessarily align to that definition. Like you can really pick and choose. It's not a box, it's a shirt, and you can change your shirt and you can make it pretty and you can make it the way you want to, you can change it. It's so flexible and fluid, and I feel like this generation of kids have such a better understanding of that than we ever did. Like even now, honestly, like it's really hard, but they are so flexible and fluid with the way that they perceive themselves and the way that they perceive others. And it'd be nice to live in a world where we don't need labels, but at the time that we do, it's really nice to have those just as like a cushion and just kind of as proof that we exist, especially as people continuously try to tell us that we don't exist. I love it when folks are just like, oh yeah, non-binary people don't exist. I'm just like, well, I guess I'm a ghost then.
Imaginary friend.
Exactly. Well, that's fine. I take it.
Actually, and so one of the lines that was in the copy that was read at the very beginning of this was that line that I think is so powerful, that theme of there's a difference between tolerance and acceptance. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to like just talk a little bit, I think that relates to what you're saying, right? And like that's a big piece of the book.
No, totally. And that goes back to like the reason why my idea of the series changed. Because in my initial idea, when it was Callie, Shenanigans, and Helston, it was tolerance and acceptance are the same thing. Like the rules have changed. While it says that queer people are allowed to exist, everything's fine, but that's not the case. Like just because there is like pro-queer legislation, it doesn't mean we're safe. It doesn't mean there aren't bigots who are willing to break those rules, and it doesn't mean that the majority are automatically going to change their minds. So when I was like looking at the series, and I was thinking about Willow in particular, who's just like so eager to find his own presentation and his words and the way he looks and the way he dresses, and just like understand who he is within his world. You know, there are people out there going, that's not what a king looks like. You know, and they're looking at Callie like, that's not what a knight looks like. Therefore, it's not okay. And, you know, just because something is allowed to exist, it doesn't mean it's comfortable in that space. And I feel like kids are allowed to feel comfortable. You know, I think that's really important. And I think, you know, sheltering kids in the name of protection is not protecting them. It's doing exactly the opposite, because, you know, it's just validating the bigotry quietly, you know. And that was such an interesting thing to explore, especially in Ewella and Nick, who love their kids like with their whole hearts and souls. You know, they want to protect their kids more than anything else, but in doing that, they actively harm them. And that was a really interesting, weird thing to explore. I don't have children. I saw from my mind. But yeah, it was a really important theme. And it's still one that I'm tackling.
And so switching gears a little bit, just to talk about sort of the experience having these books published, you know, having been writing for a long time, has there been anything that has been surprising for you? What has it been like actually, you know, you think you spend a lot of time when you're writing and when you're looking to get published, imagining and dreaming about that experience of having your books published. And so now that it's happened, you have now 2 books in the series. Has there been anything about that experience, whether it's, you know, anything about like interacting with kids or readers, or just like how you feel about writing once you have things published, you know, anything in the whole spectrum of all of it that has surprised you?
It's just, the whole thing has just blown my mind. It continues to blow my mind. I'm still waiting to wake up in 2019 with, you know, everything that have happened, because it really has been such a bizarre, cool dream. Not just the fact that I get to publish a book, but the fact that I get to publish these books right now with a major publisher that is actually getting it into the hands of kids. The fact that so many booksellers and librarians and teachers are actively championing these books and getting them into kids' hands, it's spectacular, because, you know, the landscape of book banning right now, it really feels like the front lines. And it is really scary, you know, when books are banned. It's not just the books that are being banned, it's the kids who are reading them, it's the authors, it's the people who need to see it. And it's been very frustrating for me to see what's going on and feel like I can't do anything, but all I can do is write these books and hope that they will get out there. And so far that's going pretty well. Another surprising thing is that I still like writing. There was definitely a moment last year where I was like, oh my God, if this is the dream, I hate it. And I was really anxious that I would never enjoy writing again, but going through the process of book 3 definitely confirmed that this is what I want to do.
I think that's important for you to say that and for other authors to hear that, because I think it's scary I think it's so common that is actually something that happens along the process, is suddenly like, wait, do I even like writing anymore? And so it's reassuring for people to know that that's a very typical kind of emotional beat in the character arc of an author once they get their books published.
And it was just such a weird moment. Like, I feel like that day is just going to stick in my mind forever, just like staring at my laptop going, it's not done. And it was supposed to be done. And, you know, I have everything that I worked for and I don't feel good. Like, what needs to change? Because, you know, it's worth doing and it's worth striving for, but I don't want to do it if it makes me feel like this. But being able to like have that internal conversation and make the allowances that I needed to make to continue to love what I'm doing. Because I feel like, you know, readers get out what the author puts in. And I feel like if I'm resentful of having to write it, if I'm not enjoying it, if I feel constrained or whatever, then it's just going to come across badly. So getting out of my head and just enjoying the time I spend with my characters and like, you know, trusting them to tell me the story and trusting you to make it better. It helps having a published book that says, here, I can do it. It's proof. You know, I can take this terrible first draft and it will become shiny eventually by some miracle. That's honestly the best thing ever.
So, and then broadening out for the, experience of being in the writer community, do you want to share some of the books and authors who've inspired you historically? Obviously, I know Tamara Pierce, you've mentioned, but are there other authors and books that you felt like were formative in who you are as an author, and then other authors publishing today in the market who are, maybe newer authors that also you feel really excited and inspired to watch?
Yeah, so the books I loved as a kid were like the really old ones, like Secret Garden and Anne of Green Gables, and I've been talking to them about them a lot lately, and it's just really solidified like why I enjoyed those books, and I still do, because like, even though they're historical and they feel very far away, it still feels like such a universal experience of being a kid and just being so like frustrated with the world and wanting to change things, and creating this new world within the bigger picture. And I love that. I love scrappy, angry girls who want to change the world. So that's always what I've gone towards. And as far as modern stuff, like, we're so lucky with the books that are coming out and that are out right now. It's wild, and I'm so honored to be a part of this community. My favorites right now are definitely Shad Hadid by George Dredge. It's a 2-book series, and it's about a kid who goes to the Alexandria Academy of Alchemy, and shenanigans ensue, and you get very hungry because you want to eat baklava. It's amazing. And then everything by AJ Sass, especially On the Edge, which is, I think it was the first book about a non-binary kid that I ever read. And I just, like, I think I was 28, 29 when I read it. And it gave me that experience of being seen for the first time. It was so cool. And then I sent it to my grandmother, and she devoured it, and she loves it. And she said it made it make sense to her in a way that it never had before, which is just kind of amazing. Equally, the book that AJ did with Nicole Melleby called Camp Quilt Bag. It's a dual POV middle grade book about 2 queer kids who go to a queer summer camp. And it's such a warm book. It's such a delightful experience. It feels like you're there, like, letting these kids make mistakes within this like safe space, and like discovering their words and who they are, and like getting it wrong and starting again, and friendship difficulties, but nothing too intense. It's delightful. I feel like if Callie was a contemporary book, it would be like Camp Quilt Bag.
Well, do we want to open it up to questions from, if there were any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, hi. Yes, I love it. I love listening to you guys chat about this book. It's such a good time. So if you in the audience have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment section, and I will read them off so that they can get answered. Okay, so we have a question from David for Esme. Have you recovered from the ending of Dragon's Roost yet?
I'm recovering from the end of book 3. Listen, I remember when I wrote the end of Dragon's Roost, and I was in Barnes & Noble Cafe, and I just remember sitting there going, am I allowed to do this? And I remember calling my wife going, Christine, I don't think I'm allowed to do this. And then I did it anyway. And Lisa didn't tell me to stop, so I didn't. It was great. No, I have not recovered, and I'm so sorry.
I'm working on forgiving you in my own personal journey, but I'm sure that the audience will, be excited for book 3 to see what happens next. Andrew is asking, do you know how the series will end?
I do. Perfectly. It's very exciting. It's the one thing that's keeping me going through all of this.
Wonderful. And then Megan, fair. That's so fair. We got to keep some things close to our chests. You got to keep people coming back, picking up the next one, getting those pre-orders in, which you can do at Left Bank Books as soon as it's available for pre-order. Megan says, Esme, if you were going to write a Sir Callie spin-off series, what would it be? Which I am so excited to hear the answer to that.
I have a lot of ideas about future generations. I'd love to write these kids as adults. I think they would be delightful and chaotic and fabulous. I have some ideas for like in-world things, but not about these characters. I'd love to write Neil's story from the beginning. I think that would be really fun, but also maybe a little bit too heavy. We'll see. Anyway, yes, please. I'd like a whole Callie universe, please.
I for sure would love that so much.
Also, Nick shenanigans as a teenager, because he was an absolute menace to society.
Oh, Nick and the King getting into antics.
Antics, to put it bluntly.
That's one of the great things you also do, Esme, is the adult characters in your world are developed and dimensional and interesting, which I think a lot of middle grade authors shy away from and sort of come from this notion that you're not supposed to focus the adults in a middle world.
No,
but
I love the adults.
As long as you make the adults real people, and they don't just seem one-dimensional, all good or all bad, then adults are fair game for middle grade readers. They want to read.
They really are. It's a lot of fun, and that's where the kids come from. They don't just spawn.
Yeah, definitely. Kids don't just spawn. I love that. Any other questions y'all want to pop in the comments? I can think of plenty, so, Okay, this is a great question from Nia. I hope that I'm pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry if I'm not. The world of publishing is such a roller coaster. What keeps you going on tough days?
Oh, that's a really good question. Deadlines? No. The real answer is I love being read more than anything else. I think it's because I grew up in fan fiction where I could post it as soon as I had written it and I would get feedback immediately, and that little burst of validation is very addictive. I love reading people's reactions to my words, especially when they're different. I think one of the coolest things is how you can give 5 different people one page and they'll get something completely different out of it. I think that's amazing. So yeah, like talking to readers, especially kids, kids are amazing. I've been lucky enough to do a lot of school visits, and yeah, that they are what give me hope and keep me going even when everything else sucks.
Yeah, that's
also I can't do anything else.
I'm sorry.
Also, I cannot do anything else.
Oh, sure. Fair enough. George is asking, who's a better conversation partner, Lisa Abrams or George?
Show George. No one asked.
I think they asked.
You're both perfect, and I love you both very much.
Perfect. That's so funny. Lisa, I have a question for you really quickly, just because I'm interested. What was your favorite scene in Sir Callie and the Dragon's Roost?
It's a spoiler, though. It's definitely the Edwyn scene. I'm trying to think of how to unspoilerly say. I feel like there's an Edwyn scene that when I read it for the first time, I definitely had chills, and I was like, this series is going to set people on fire in the good way. I was like, I just read, because I have worked on a lot of series in my career where I've known when a series has it. And I read that Edwyn scene and I was like, this series has it. And it's the kind of moment where you know that the passion it's going to inspire in readers because Esme was able to write an emotional moment that digs into every inch of your body, and you just feel it everywhere. And you're like, I am in this till the end and I cannot look away until I see what happens to this character. But I can't tell you what the scene is.
I'm very proud of that scene.
As you should be. It shook me to my entire core reading that. If anyone else has any questions, keep them coming in the comments. We'd love to have them answered for you. Is there a character that you feel like you identify with the most in this series?
I'm 100% Callie. It drives me insane. But a little bit of all of them. I feel like you can't really write characters unless you mine something out of yourself. So I definitely have a kinship with all of them, good and bad. I feel like it's such an interesting way to just question yourself in your writing, because I'm always very particular about what I want to put out in the world. So no matter what I'm doing or who I'm writing about, I want it to be very honest, and that can be really tough for an author, because it's not always good and shiny. There's lots of flaws in a lot of people. All this to say is yes.
Vandell is wondering,
my mother-in-law, I love you so much.
Oh, lovely. Will the queen ever become strong and take charge of things in Helston?
Wow, burn.
Yeah, you said it was your mother-in-law. So I said, okay, I'll let you know what she said.
Okay. She does her best. But there are definitely characters who are in a better position to do better things. Elowen needs to go take a vacation.
That's so fair. Yeah. Maybe if she just like reprioritizes, she can come back and be like, okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I like her as a character. I don't think she's a bad character, but she makes a lot of big mistakes. But also, like, she's so tied up in everything that has happened and everything that could potentially happen. Like, her present is so tiny. She really struggles to like see anything. Because she's all, mad at the king for like leaving, and Joan died, and Willow's in peril like 90% of the time, and his BFF is a complete disaster. She's really not working with much, so I don't necessarily blame her for her choices. They're just not good ones.
That's so fair. Amanda is wondering, were there any particular inspirations for the Roost in particular, like the Roost when?
Yes. It actually came from a song, and it's called The Parting Glass, and specifically the Melinda version. I remember jamming to it in the car and be going, I want to put that in my book. That's kind of the starting point of like the whole book 2. Even when I didn't know what book 2 was, I was like, I want a pub in a forest, and it's going to be joyful, and it's going to be queer, and the kids are going to go there, and I don't know anything else, but this is what it's going to be. So go listen to that song, I guess. It's really good.
Okay, I'm making notes for myself as you say that. I'm trying
also,
to listen to.
Very important in England, the hubs of communities. So you needed to have one.
Yeah. Shane is wondering, what's Esme's favorite tea?
Oh, PG Tips, obviously. PG Tips with just like that much milk, a little tiny bit. But if I'm feeling fancy, I will drink Earl Grey. But my favorite thing is at Starbucks with 1 English breakfast tea bag and 1 Earl Grey tea bag. That is the best combination ever. 10 out of 10 recommend. And green tea is not tea. It's just pond water.
Wonderful.
I speak the truth.
And that's what we need. Let's see. Any other questions anyone has rooting around in there? Now's your chance. Without getting into spoilers, can we just have a second to talk about Elowen and how she's doing?
Oh my goodness. I feel like Elowen's slip to the dark side was everything that I wanted to put on the page, and that really inspired the rest of the series, honestly. Like, she's so mad at the world, and she's so powerful and very, very scary. So I've really enjoyed watching her kind of take these choices that she's never had before and just like completely running with them and just getting completely out of control and really like pushing away her friends because she knows what she wants and she's always held back because of other people. And then when she gets to the other side, she's just like, oh, this was a mistake. So I'm really enjoying seeing Elowen kind of respond and recover from the consequences of her rage and her fire without losing anything of herself. Also, friendship complications are always really fun to write.
Definitely. As you say, you are Callie, I am deeply an Elowen, so every single choice that she makes, like, no, I get it. And you know what? She's not wrong.
The problem with Elowen is that, like, she's the smartest person I've ever met, so I really struggle to write her.
Okay, well, now I feel bad comparing myself to her.
She's the kind of character that just, like, will not speak to me. Like, she won't even speak to other characters, and even in her head, she's very, like, this is what we're doing. I'm going to keep it contained, which can be really hard when you're writing her from Callie's point of view, who's just very, like, this is what I know, this is what I see, this is what we're doing. And I was there, like, doing puzzles in her mind. Drives me insane.
Catherine said Elphaba vibes about.
100%, which means Callie is Glinda, and I love that for them.
Oh, if they start singing For Good, I will start sobbing.
Oh, listen. Actually, a lot of the book 3 was inspired by the Wicked soundtrack, so.
Oh, and it's the 20-year anniversary, so that's perfect. If there are no other questions, which I think that we might be running out of questions, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. Lisa, thank you so much for being an incredible conversation partner. It was so great to watch y'all interact. I love when editors and authors get to chat with each other because it's so fun. It's such a like relational dynamic. So thank you guys so much for coming and celebrating Sir Callie and the Dragon's Roost. I cannot wait for the third one. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited.
It's pretty good. I get to be that fan who's like, I've already read book 3.
That's everything. We're gonna say bye.
Thanks for coming.
So bye, y'all.
Is it glitching?